Welcome, dear listener. As you settle into your cozy space, take a slow, deep breath in and out. Feel the tension of the day softly melting away. Allow your body to sink into comfort and let the gentle warmth of your surroundings wrap around you like a soft blanket. Picture a quiet, candlelit room, the air filled with the faint fragrance of lavender and rose. The fire in the hearth crackles gently, its glow casting delicate, dancing shadows across the walls. Outside, a soft evening breeze rustles the leaves of the garden, a calming symphony that beckons your mind to relax and drift. Now, let us step back in time to a world where the art of courtship was delicate, deliberate, and steeped in charm. Our story today begins in a quaint Victorian village, where young hearts navigated love through the refined lens of etiquette and tradition. In this village, there lived a young woman named Eleanor. With her raven-black hair and eyes, the color of midnight, she carried herself with a grace that reflected the virtues of her upbringing. Eleanor's home, a charming manor adorned with ivy and blooming roses, was a center of social gatherings, where the community gathered to celebrate and converse. Her days were structured with music lessons, literature studies, and refined conversation practice. But as evening approached, the world shifted to social balls and, where young men and women met under the watchful eyes of parents and chaperones. These gatherings were more than entertainment. They were carefully orchestrated arenas for forming bonds and building reputations. At one such grand ball, Eleanor's gaze met that of a young gentleman named Charles. Tall and dignified, his movements reflected confidence, balanced with respect. He approached with a gentle smile, offering Miss Eleanor, "May I have the honor of this dance?" With a demure nod, Eleanor extended her gloved hand, allowing herself to glide across the polished floor, in harmony with Charles. Each movement was precise, deliberate, and full of As Eleanor and Charles continued their delicate dance across the ballroom, soft strains of the string quartet surrounded them, each note floating gently through the warm, candlelit space. The polished wooden floor reflected their graceful movements, while the murmurs of other guests faded into a distant, comforting hum. After the dance, Eleanor and Charles were guided to a quiet parlor, where lace curtains framed the moonlit garden outside. The room was decorated with soft floral arrangements. The gentle crackle of a nearby fire added a soothing rhythm to the space. Here, under the watchful eyes of Eleanor's mother, conversation began, not hurried, not loud, but a soft exchange of thoughts and stories, each word chosen carefully, each glance meaningful. Charles offered a small leather-bound book of poetry, the pages filled with verses that spoke of love and longing. Eleanor accepted it with a gentle nod, the soft rustle of the pages echoing in the quiet room. In return, Eleanor presented Charles with a delicate handkerchief, embroidered with her initials, a simple gesture of esteem, a symbol of the growing bond between them. Their meetings were always structured, each encounter carefully arranged with chaperones present to ensure propriety. Afternoon walks through the garden, where the sunlight danced on the flower petals and a gentle breeze stirred the air, became moments of quiet connection. Eleanor and Charles would exchange subtle smiles and soft words, their emotions communicated through gestures that were refined, tender, and meaningful. Even the smallest moments carried weight. Shared glance over a teacup of tea, a courteous bow at the sound of music. A fleeting touch on a gloved hand, each gesture was an intricate part of their evolving courtship. The Victorian world demanded patience, reflection, and respect, turning each encounter into a dance of the heart, where emotion was expressed delicately, without rush. As evening fell, the garden lanterns flickered softly, casting golden light across the manicured paths. Eleanor and Charles would walk side by side, the soft rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of nightbirds accompanying them. Every step, every movement, every whispered word strengthened the quiet intimacy between them, nurturing a love that was gentle, deliberate, and beautifully restrained. And so, in the tranquil rhythm of Victorian society, Eleanor and Charles moved together, learning, observing, and growing closer with each careful, tender interaction, their hearts guided by tradition. As the seasons shifted, Eleanor and Charles continued to meet in the soft, structured rhythm of Victorian courtship. Spring brought gentle blossoms in the garden, filling the air with subtle fragrances of roses and lilies. They would stroll along the gravel paths, their conversation light yet meaningful, punctuated by polite laughter and the occasional shared glance. The world around them seemed to whisper in harmony with their budding affection. The wind rustling through the trees, the soft hum of bees among the flowers, the distant sound of water trickling from a small fountain. Their correspondence also became a cherished part of the courtship. Handwritten letters, sealed with wax and scented with lavender, traveled between their homes. Each carefully crafted word, each deliberate stroke of the pen, carried the emotions they could not yet express freely in public. Eleanor would read Charles' letters beside the fire, feeling the warmth of both the hearth and his thoughtful words. She would reply with measured care, her own sentiments woven delicately into the lines. Evenings at the manor became small rituals of comfort and subtle intimacy. The fire crackled softly, its gentle rhythm echoing the steady beat of their hearts. Eleanor would play a quiet melody on the piano, her fingers gliding over the keys, while Charles listened with rapt attention, appreciating the grace and dedication in her movements. The air was filled with a gentle tranquility, where every sound, the rustle of silk, the soft closing of a book, the muted sigh of contentment, added to the serene atmosphere. Gifts exchanged between them were thoughtful and refined, a delicate locket, a pressed flower, a carefully chosen book. Each offering was more than a token, it was a testament to attention, respect, and understanding. Even in moments of silence, the presence of one another carried warmth, the gentle pressure of companionship, and a quiet reassurance of mutual care. As twilight descended and lanterns flickered in the garden, Eleanor and Charles would sometimes sit side by side, wrapped in soft shawls or gloves, sharing small confidences beneath the gentle glow. The world outside faded into a hush, replaced by the intimacy of their shared space, the comfort of ritual, and the slow, tender unfolding of affection. In these quiet, measured moments, the essence of Victorian dating revealed itself not in grand gestures or hurried passion, but in patience, subtlety, and a deep appreciation for the quiet beauty of connection. Love was a gentle garden, nurtured carefully, tended with thoughtfulness, and blossoming slowly into something enduring and profoundly heartfelt. As the autumn leaves began to fall, Eleanor and Charles' connection deepened in ways both subtle and profound. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves, mingling with the gentle aroma of distant wood smoke, creating a tranquil atmosphere for their quiet strolls. Each step on the soft carpet of amber and gold was accompanied by soft laughter, delicate conversation, and the occasional shy glance that spoke volumes without words. Evenings became a haven of calm reflection. Eleanor would sit by the fire, a soft shawl draped across her shoulders, turning the delicate pages of her favorite poetry books. Charles would sit nearby, his gaze occasionally lifting from his own reading to meet hers, sharing a silent understanding that needed no explanation. The crackling of the fire, the muted rustle of pages, and the soft whisper of the wind outside combined to create an intimate rhythm that nurtured both comfort and connection. The intricacies of Victorian dating meant that each meeting, however brief, was infused with careful attention. Charles might comment on Eleanor's observations of the changing leaves, compliment the way she articulated her thoughts, or remark softly on a particular line of poetry she had read aloud. Eleanor, in turn, responded with poised grace, her words measured but filled with quiet warmth and sincerity. Their exchanges, though restrained, carried a depth of feeling that only grew as the days passed. Even small gestures became treasured symbols of their affection. Charles might leave a single, carefully pressed leaf on Eleanor's writing desk, a gentle reminder of their shared walk through the garden. Eleanor, in turn, could place a small ribbon or flower within the pages of his book, a token of appreciation and thoughtfulness. Each gesture, though simple, carried the weight of intent and a growing emotional intimacy that was never rushed or forced. The garden, now golden and crisp, served as a quiet sanctuary. Lanterns flickered in the evening light, casting gentle shadows on the pathways, while the distant hoot of an owl or the soft sigh of the wind through branches became a soothing backdrop. Side by side, Eleanor and Charles walked slowly, savoring the calm of the moment, the gentle cadence of their hearts, and the quiet assurance of mutual understanding. Through these careful, tender actions, they continued to cultivate a love built on patience, respect, and gentle attentiveness. As winter approached, A gentle hush settled over the village, dusting the gardens and pathways with a delicate frost. The chill in the air invited Eleanor and Charles to gather closer during their encounters, wrapped in warm coats, soft scarves, gloved hands that occasionally brushed together a fleeting touch, yet filled with tender significance. The hearth inside Eleanor's manor became a place of warmth and comfort. The fire's glow reflected softly on polished wood, casting flickering patterns across the walls and ceiling. The gentle crackling accompanied the quiet murmur of their conversation, each word spoken with measured care. They shared stories of childhood, reflections on poetry, and musings about the changing seasons, their voices blending into the serene rhythm of the evening. Even the act of gifting became a refined ritual. Charles might present Eleanor with a small, intricately carved trinket, while she might offer a delicate bookmark adorned with pressed flowers. These tokens, though modest, carried the weight of thought, attentiveness, and growing emotional intimacy. Each gesture was more than an object, it was a quiet expression of care, a way to communicate feelings that could not yet be spoken freely in public. Afternoons were often spent in the drawing room, where soft light filtered through lace curtains, casting gentle patterns on the carpet. Eleanor played quiet melodies on the piano, her fingers gliding across the keys, while Charles listened attentively. Occasionally, they would read aloud to one another, voices blending in a soft cadence that echoed like a lullaby through the tranquil room. Each moment was deliberate, unhurried, and steeped in gentle attentiveness. Even brief walks in the frosty garden carried significance. The crisp air nipped at their cheeks, yet they walked slowly, savoring the serenity of the winter landscape. The muted crunch of snow beneath their feet, the quiet sigh of the wind through bare branches, and the distant flicker of lantern light combined to create a peaceful, intimate atmosphere. Side by side, they learned to communicate through subtle glances, the tilt of a head, or the soft pressure of a hand resting lightly on a gloved finger. Through these carefully guided interactions, Eleanor and Charles' bond grew stronger, nurtured by patience, etiquette, and attentive observation. Victorian dating, with its structured elegance, revealed that love could blossom slowly, its foundation built not on haste or flamboyance, but on quiet attentiveness, gentle gestures, and the serene beauty of deliberate connection. The evening grows even quieter, the golden glow of the fire blending softly with the gentle shadows cast by candlelight. The young woman closes her book slowly, placing it back on the side table with a soft, deliberate touch. She sits for a moment, gazing into the fire, letting the warmth of its glow wash over her face and hands. Each flicker of flame seems to move in rhythm with her breathing, gentle and hypnotic, inviting calm and stillness. Outside, the last traces of sunlight fade completely, leaving the garden bathed in a cool, muted blue. The rustle of leaves continues, soft and irregular, mingling with the distant call of a night bird. You can almost feel the serene coolness of the evening air brushing against your cheeks, smoothing away tension, carrying the faint, sweet scent of evening blooms that linger in the garden. In the house, the sounds are soothing and familiar. The crackling fire, the soft creak of the wooden floorboards, and the low hum of conversation mix together in a perfect, calming harmony. Every movement is slow and intentional, a bow, a slight adjustment of a cushion, the careful placement of a cup on a table. These small gestures, guided by Victorian rules and proprieties, create a quiet order that seems to resonate deeply with the rhythm of the mind, encouraging relaxation and focus on the present moment. The young woman rises gracefully and moves toward a window where she lifts the lace curtain just slightly. The cool evening breeze drifts inside, brushing softly against her skin, carrying with it the sounds and scents of the garden. Her hand lingers on the fabric, feeling its delicate texture, as if grounding herself in this serene world. She inhales slowly, letting the scent of flowers, the warmth of the fire, and the gentle calm of the evening fill her senses completely. As you imagine this, allow yourself to sink even deeper into relaxation. Feel the steady rhythm of your breath, slow and even, like the gentle passing of time in this Victorian home. Picture the golden firelight reflecting softly on your surroundings, the comforting order of the room, the soft, deliberate movements of those around you, all contributing to a sense of profound peace and calm. Here, in this quiet house, every ritual, every glance, every gesture, has a soothing quality. The structure, the care, and the attention to detail create a world where your mind can rest, where your body can fully release, and where the gentle rhythm of life encourages the deepest, most serene relaxation. As winter slowly gave way to the gentle promises of spring, Eleanor and Charles' courtship continued with the same refined rhythm of patience and care. The first buds of flowers peeked through the softened earth. A subtle warmth returned to the air, carrying with it the fragrance of new beginnings. Each meeting between them was imbued with a quiet excitement, as though the world itself celebrated the slow, careful unfolding of their bond. The garden became a sanctuary once more, with pathways lined in early blooms and sunlight filtering through tender green leaves. They walked side by side, their footsteps gentle on the soft ground, sharing small observations about the delicate beauty surrounding them. The rustle of petals in the breeze and the distant hum of bees formed a serene soundtrack, a gentle accompaniment to the measured pace of their companionship. Within the manor, Eleanor and Charles continued their intimate routines. The drawing room, bathed in the soft morning light, became a haven for quiet activities. Charles might read aloud from a book of poetry, his voice a soothing cadence that Eleanor could follow as her fingers traced the intricate patterns of lace on her handkerchief. At times, she would play the piano, each note floating delicately through the space, weaving a tapestry of sound that seemed to echo the tenderness between them. Every gesture, no matter how small, carried weight. A careful touch of a hand, a thoughtful remark. The exchange of a book or a delicate trinketal, these were expressions of attention, respect, and genuine affection. Nothing was hurried. Nothing was left unconsidered. Victorian dating demanded mindfulness, and in this mindful space, Eleanor and Charles' connection grew richer, deeper, and more meaningful. Their correspondence, too, reflected this deliberate pace. Letters flowed back and forth, scented lightly with lavender or rose, each word chosen to convey both thoughtfulness and emotional nuance. Eleanor would read Charles' letters by the fireside, feeling the warmth of the words envelop her like the gentle embrace of a soft shawl. Charles, in turn, would treasure each message, noting the subtleties in her handwriting and the careful expression of her sentiments. Even as their hearts grew closer, the principles of etiquette and propriety guided their every action. They understood that love, in its most enduring form, required patience, observation, and care. Every glance, every gesture, every quiet moment was part of a larger, graceful danza, Victorian courtship unfolding with quiet elegance and profound serenity. As spring flourished into early summer, Eleanor and Charles continued to navigate the delicate steps of their Victorian courtship with grace and mindfulness. The garden bloomed fully, a vibrant tapestry of roses, lilacs, and peonies, their fragrances mingling in the warm air. Each walk through the garden became a serene ritual, where conversation, glances, and gestures intertwined into a gentle language of affection. Eleanor often paused to admire the flowers, her fingers lightly brushing the petals, and Charles would notice these small details, commenting softly on their beauty. Each observation, each shared moment of attention, reinforced the growing connection between them. The world outside seemed to slow, allowing their hearts to speak in quiet harmony without the need for haste or grandiose displays. Inside the manor, the drawing room offered another space of intimacy. The sun streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the polished wood floors and delicate lace curtains. Eleanor played gentle melodies on the piano, her music a soft current that flowed through the room. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a compliment or softly humming along. Evenings were often spent in quiet conversation by the fire, where the crackle of flames and the subtle shifting of chairs set a gentle cadence for their interaction. Every gesture was deliberate and measured, a hand placed lightly on the armrest, a bow of acknowledgement, a carefully chosen word. Gifts remained an important part of their courtship, but each was meaningful rather than ostentatious. Charles might present a small locket or a pressed flower, while Eleanor offered a delicately embroidered handkerchief or a book of poetry. Each token symbolized attention, care, and the nurturing of their shared bond. Even brief moments such as passing one another in the hallway, sharing a glance across the room, or exchanging a softly spoken compliment were imbued with significance. The Victorian rules of courtship transformed ordinary acts into expressions of subtle intimacy, emphasizing patience, respect, and the quiet development of trust and affection. Through the measured beauty of these daily interactions, Eleanor and Charles' connection deepened. Their courtship became a gentle dance of observation, understanding, and care, where the elegance of restraint and the serenity of mindful attention allowed love to bloom naturally, tenderly, and enduringly. As the days grew warmer and summer unfolded in full, Eleanor and Charles' bond blossomed alongside the gardens they often wandered. The soft sunlight filtered through the trees, creating gentle patterns on the garden paths. Birds sang their delicate songs, and the rustle of leaves in the breeze provided a soothing backdrop to the calm, measured rhythm of their courtship. Their walks were slow and unhurried, each step an opportunity to notice the beauty of nature and the subtle expressions of one another's character. Charles might point out the delicate veins of a leaf, or Eleanor might comment on the harmonious arrangement of blooms in the flower beds. Each observation was a gentle acknowledgement of attention and care, reinforcing the quiet intimacy between them. Inside the manor, the drawing room became a sanctuary for shared hobbies and soft companionship. Eleanor might embroider a small piece of linen, while Charles sketched the patterns of sunlight on the floor. Their activities, though separate, were harmoniously connected by presence, attention, and the comforting awareness of shared space. The crackle of the fireplace, the occasional murmur of a distant carriage, and the soft rustle of fabric contributed to the tranquil atmosphere. Gifts continued to symbolize the deliberate nature of their courtship. A hand-painted bookmark, a delicate ribbon, a pressed blossom each offering was meaningful, a token of thoughtfulness rather than extravagance. Eleanor and Charles cherished these small gestures, understanding that love in their society was cultivated through patience, mindfulness, and subtle attentiveness. Evenings often concluded with quiet reflection by the fire, where they shared soft conversation or read aloud to one another. Charles' voice, calm and melodic, mingled with the gentle crackle of the flames, while Eleanor's responses were poised, thoughtful, and imbued with warmth. In these serene moments, they found comfort not in words alone, but in the steady, unspoken rhythm of shared presence. Through these carefully guided interactions, Eleanor and Charles' affection deepened. Victorian courtship revealed its essence. Love expressed not through grand gestures or hurried passion, but through attentive observation, patient communication, and the quiet nurturing of connection. Each glance, gesture, and word became a thread in the intricate tapestry of their growing bond, weaving a love that was gentle, enduring, and profoundly tender. As the long summer days gradually waned, Eleanor and Charles found a quiet rhythm in their courtship that felt both natural and deeply comforting. The golden light of late afternoon filtered through the garden trees, casting warm, dappled shadows on the pathways they strolled together. Each step they took was slow, deliberate, and filled with attention, the very essence of Victorian dating, where patience and mindfulness guided every interaction. During these walks, they spoke softly, their words carefully chosen to reflect both thoughtfulness and charm. Eleanor might describe the delicate scent of newly blossomed roses, while Charles observed the gentle flutter of a butterfly, their shared observations forming a silent dialogue of care and attention. The garden, alive with summer's vibrancy, became a serene sanctuary for their growing affection, each element flower breeze, and sunlight coloring the subtle beauty of their relationship. Inside the manor, the quiet sanctuary of the drawing room offered another layer of intimacy. Eleanor's fingers would glide over the piano keys, producing gentle melodies that filled the room, while Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a softly spoken compliment or a quiet hum to accompany the tune. Every sound, every gesture, every shared glance contributed to a delicate dance of presence and understanding, where the atmosphere itself seemed to encourage calm, trust, and attentiveness. Gifts remained thoughtful, symbolic gestures. A pressed flower tucked into the pages of a poetry book, a finely embroidered handkerchief, or a small sketch of a garden path, each item carried meaning far beyond its material value. They were expressions of intention, careful consideration, and growing affection, strengthening the bond between Eleanor and Charles in quiet, deliberate ways. Even the smallest shared moments held significance. Passing one another in a sunlit hallway, exchanging a glance across the room, or sharing a fleeting smile during tea-all were subtle acknowledgments of their connection, quietly reinforcing mutual respect and understanding. Through these measured acts and gentle attentiveness, their courtship unfolded naturally, without rush or urgency. Victorian dating was a slow, deliberate process, where love was nurtured carefully through observation. As the summer slowly gave way to the gentle coolness of early autumn, Eleanor and Charles' courtship continued with the same thoughtful rhythm that had guided them through spring and summer. The garden, now painted in shades of amber, gold, and crimson, provided a serene backdrop for their walks, each leaf seeming to whisper secrets of patience, care, and tender affection. They strolled along the garden paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing together, a subtle gesture carrying more meaning than words ever could. The crisp air was filled with the quiet sounds of nature, the rustle of leaves underfoot, the gentle flutter of wings, and the soft murmur of distant water from the manor fountain. Every sensory detail seemed to heighten their awareness of one another, reinforcing the gentle intimacy of their connection. Inside, the manor remained a sanctuary of calm and refined comfort. Eleanor often played quiet melodies on the piano, while Charles listened attentively, the delicate notes flowing through the room and mingling with the soft crackle of the fireplace. Sometimes, they would read to one another, each word chosen with care, each phrase a shared reflection of thought and emotion. Even in silence, their presence communicated warmth, attention, and a growing understanding. Gifts and gestures remained small, but deeply meaningful. Pressed autumn leaf, a hand-stitched ribbon, or a softly scented book of poetry became tokens of thoughtfulness and respect. Each offering was an acknowledgement of the care with which they approached one another, a reminder that love was cultivated in the quiet, deliberate moments of life rather than through grand or hasty expressions. Evenings often concluded with gentle reflection by the fire, the soft glow illuminating their faces as they shared quiet conversation or comfortable silence. Charles might remark on the beauty of the changing season, or Eleanor might recall a tender memory from their walks, and each exchange deepened their connection. Through these patient and attentive interactions, their affection continued to grow. Victorian courtship, in its deliberate elegance, nurtured a love rooted in respect, observation, and tender attentiveness. Each gesture, glance, and word became part of the quiet symphony of their relationship, creating a bond that was as enduring as it was gentle. As night fell over the manor and the garden lay bathed in soft moonlight, Eleanor and Charles walked together as autumn deepened. The manor and its gardens became a tapestry of warm colors and soft textures, creating a perfect sanctuary for Eleanor and Charles' continuing courtship. Golden leaves drifted gently from the trees, their quiet descent mirrored by the slow, deliberate rhythm of the young couple's interactions. Each walk through the garden was an opportunity to observe, reflect, and nurture their growing bond. With every gesture imbued with subtle meaning and tender care, the crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the faint aroma of wood smoke from the manor's hearth. Eleanor and Charles walked slowly along the winding paths, their gloved hands brushing occasionally, a fleeting touch that spoke volumes. The distant chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind added a natural, serene soundtrack to their thoughtful companionship, encouraging calmness and gentle attentiveness. Inside the manor, evenings were spent in the drawing room, where warm firelight bathed the room in soft gold. Eleanor might play a gentle tune on the piano, each note flowing gracefully and filling the space with tranquility. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or a quietly spoken compliment. Their shared presence, even without words, created an atmosphere of intimacy and mutual appreciation, a quiet space where affection was nurtured with patience. Small gifts continued to serve as tokens of their care for one another. A delicately pressed autumn leaf, a book carefully chosen for its poetry, or a subtly embroidered handkerchief became symbols of thoughtfulness. Each exchange, though understated, reinforced the growing emotional intimacy between them, reminding both that love flourishes through attention, respect, and the deliberate cultivation of connection. During quiet moments by the fireplace, their conversations reflected both depth and gentleness. Charles might comment on the soft glow of the fading sunlight, while Eleanor shared reflections on the beauty of the season. Each word was considered, each glance meaningful, forming a subtle dialogue that deepened understanding and trust. Through these calm, deliberate interactions, Eleanor and Charles' relationship flourished. Victorian courtship revealed itself as an art of patience, restraint, and mindfulness. Love grew steadily through observation, careful attention, and thoughtful gestures. In the gentle rhythm of daily life, surrounded by the serene beauty of nature and the comforting warmth of the... As the autumn days slowly shortened and the air grew crisper, Eleanor and Charles found themselves savoring each encounter with an even deeper sense of calm and attentiveness. The gardens, now richly adorned with amber, crimson, and gold leaves, became a quiet sanctuary where every glance and gesture held delicate significance. Their walks through the foliage-laden paths were measured and serene. Each step an opportunity to notice the subtle beauty of the season and the gentle expressions of one another's character. The soft whisper of the wind through the trees and the rustle of leaves beneath their feet created a gentle, meditative rhythm. Occasionally, a leaf would drift down, landing near their path, a small reminder of the quiet poetry present in every moment. Glances were exchanged, fingers brushed over gloved hands, and subtle smiles communicated emotions that words could not fully express. Each small interaction deepened the bond carefully cultivated over months of courtship. Within the warmth of the manor, the drawing room offered a haven of tranquility. Eleanor would play the piano, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys, producing soft, soothing melodies. Charles listened, his attention unwavering, occasionally murmuring a quiet compliment or gently humming along. The crackle of the fireplace, the faint ticking of the grandfather clock, and the distant rustle of curtains created a calm soundscape, perfectly complementing the soft rhythm of their connection. Gifts remained thoughtful symbols of their affection. Charles might leave a carefully pressed leaf inside a poetry book, while Eleanor might offer a delicately embroidered handkerchief or a simple ribbon tied with care. These modest tokens spoke volumes, communicating respect, thoughtfulness, the tender consideration that defined Victorian courtship. Each gesture reinforced the growing intimacy between them without rushing the natural pace of their connection. Even brief moments carried profound meaning. A shared glance across a sunlit hallway, fleeting smile during tea, or the careful exchange of a book of poems. Every action, no matter how small, was part of a measured dance of attention, patience, and mutual understanding. Victorian dating, Eleanor and Charles discovered, was an intricate interplay of subtle gestures, quiet observation, and tender attentiveness. As the day drew to a close, and the soft glow of the setting sun painted the garden in muted shades of gold, Eleanor and Charles would walk side by side, savoring the serene rhythm of nature, the comforting presence of one another, and the delicate, enduring affection that had grown steadily over time. As the late autumn evenings grew longer and the air carried a faint chill, Eleanor and Charles' courtship remained a gentle rhythm of thoughtful attentiveness and quiet intimacy. The gardens, now almost bare, were sprinkled with the final remnants of fallen leaves, their muted colors creating a serene canvas for reflective walks. Each step along the winding paths was deliberate, measured, and filled with the shared awareness of one another's presence. The soft murmur of the wind through the remaining branches, the distant call of a night bird, and the gentle crunch of leaves beneath their feet composed a natural symphony, calming the mind and soul. Eleanor and Charles spoke softly, choosing words with care, their voices blending harmoniously with the tranquil sounds of the world around them. A gloved hand brushing another, a subtle nod or a shy smile communicated as much as any spoken sentiment, reinforcing the patient, tender nature of their connection. Inside the manor, the warmth of the drawing room became a sanctuary from the cool air. Eleanor played the piano with delicate precision, each note floating softly through the room. Charles listened quietly, occasionally offering gentle commentary or a soft murmur of appreciation. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls, while the subtle scent of burning wood mingled with the aroma of her lavender-scented handkerchief. Together, these small details created an atmosphere of serenity and attentiveness. Gifts and thoughtful gestures continued to mark their courtship. Charles might present Eleanor with a small pressed flower from a garden walk, while she offered a carefully written note tucked within the pages of a favorite book. Each offering, though modest, reflected the careful attention and consideration they placed on nurturing their bond. These small acts, repeated over time, built a foundation of trust, care, and enduring affection. Even in moments of quiet reflection, their presence spoke volumes. Sitting side by the fire, reading aloud or sharing a simple smile, they found comfort in the gentle rhythm of companionship. Victorian courtship, Eleanor and Charles had come to understand, was not about grand gestures or hurried emotion. It was about patient observation, measured interaction, and the delicate cultivation of trust and love. As twilight fell and the garden lanterns cast their soft glow, Eleanor and Charles would walk slowly along the garden paths, savoring the serene beauty of the fading light and the tender presence of one another. In this quiet, deliberate dance of hearts, love continued to bloom gently, naturally, and beautifully. As winter whispered its arrival through the village, Eleanor and Charles' courtship entered a season of quiet reflection and gentle intimacy. The gardens, now blanketed in frost, were still and serene, their beauty softened by the winter light. Each walk through the crisp air was deliberate, each step an opportunity to share small, meaningful gestures, a subtle brush of gloved hands, a soft glance, or the quiet exchange of words. The manor itself became a warm refuge from the chill. The drawing room, illuminated by flickering candlelight and the steady glow of the hearth, welcomed Eleanor and Charles into its calm embrace. The soft crackle of the fire provided a rhythmic backdrop to their conversations, which were careful, deliberate, and full of thoughtfulness. Each word was measured, each expression gentle, creating an atmosphere of quiet intimacy. Eleanor often played the piano, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys, filling the room with gentle melodies that seemed to float effortlessly on the warm air. Charles listened, his attention focused entirely on her, occasionally offering a soft hum of accompaniment or a quietly spoken word of praise. Their shared presence, even in silence, was a profound expression of connection, reinforcing the subtle yet enduring bond between them. Gifts continued to play a meaningful role in their courtship. Charles might present a small silver locket or a carefully pressed flower from the fading garden, while Eleanor would offer a delicately written note or a modest token of her own. These gestures, though understated, carried great significance, symbolizing respect, attention, and the tender care that defined their growing affection. Even ordinary moments were transformed into expressions of love. A shared glance across the room, the exchange of a gentle smile, or the quiet act of offering a seat or adjusting a shawl, all became part of the careful, mindful dance of Victorian courtship. In these small, intentional acts, Eleanor and Charles found comfort, connection, and a growing understanding of one another. Through patient observation, deliberate gestures, and shared moments of calm, their love continued to flourish. Victorian courtship revealed itself not through haste or extravagance, but through gentle attentiveness, thoughtful interaction, and the steady cultivation of trust and affection. As the winter evening deepened and the garden lay hushed beneath a soft frost, the world outside Eleanor and Charles Manor became a serene landscape of frost and gentle snow, each flake falling softly as if to mirror the quiet elegance of their courtship. The garden, now hushed and still, offered a tranquil backdrop for thoughtful walks, where every gesture, gloved hands brushing, soft smiles exchanged, or a subtle glance held deep meaning and conveyed the tender attentiveness of Victorian dating. The manor itself became a haven of warmth and intimacy. The drawing room glowed with the soft radiance of the hearth, its flickering light casting dancing shadows across walls lined with books, portraits, and delicate lace curtains. Eleanor often sat by the piano, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys, producing gentle melodies that seemed to harmonize with the soft crackle of the fire. Charles would sit nearby, his attention fixed upon her, offering subtle praise or the occasional soft hum and accompaniment. The presence of one another, even in quiet reflection, became a shared language of comfort, connection, and understanding. Thoughtful gestures and small gifts remained central to their courtship. A carefully pressed flower from the garden, a delicately penned note, or a modest token of affection communicated more than mere words could express. Each act, no matter how simple, reinforced respect, thoughtfulness, and the growing depth of their bond. In these small, intentional expressions, Eleanor and Charles nurtured a love built upon observation, patience, and gentle care. Even ordinary moments were transformed into meaningful exchanges. A shared glance across the room, the offering of a seat, a gentle adjustment of a shawl, or a quiet word of encouragement all became part of the intricate dance of Victorian courtship. Each gesture, each subtle act, contributed to the slow weaving of a connection that was both tender and enduring. Through these careful interactions, Eleanor and Charles learned the art of quiet intimacy. To observe, to respect, to respond thoughtfully, and to cultivate love with patience. Victorian courtship revealed itself as an elegant interplay of gestures, attentiveness, and deliberate action, allowing affection to grow naturally, steadily, and profoundly. As night fell, and the garden lay soft beneath a pale winter moon, Eleanor and Charles walked side by side, savoring the hushed beauty of the world around them and the gentle, enduring presence of one another. In this serene, deliberate rhythm, love flourished quietly. As winter slowly began to fade and the first hints of early spring appeared in the garden, Eleanor and Charles continued their courtship with the same calm, deliberate attentiveness that had defined their relationship. The frost receded, revealing delicate shoots of greenery, and the faint fragrance of early blossoms filled the crisp air. Every walk through the garden became a meditation, a shared experience of observation and quiet appreciation for both nature and each other. Their footsteps on the soft earth were slow and deliberate, gloved hands occasionally brushing together, each touch a gentle reassurance of presence and care. The quiet rustle of leaves, the distant chirp of returning birds, and the faint murmur of the garden fountain provided a serene backdrop. A gentle soundtrack for the subtle exchanges of affection that characterized Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and gentle intimacy. Eleanor played soft melodies on the piano, each note drifting gracefully through the air, while Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a murmured compliment or a soft hum to accompany her music. The crackling fire and the flicker of candlelight created an atmosphere of serenity, allowing them to connect deeply in both spoken and unspoken ways. Gifts and thoughtful gestures continued to convey their care and attention. Charles might leave a carefully pressed early spring flower within the pages of Eleanor's favorite book, while she might respond with a small handwritten note expressing her appreciation. Each act, though modest, was imbued with meaning, reinforcing their growing understanding, respect, and affection. Even the simplest moments held significance. A glance across the room, a shared smile, or the quiet exchange of a compliment. Each subtle gesture, carefully observed and appreciated, strengthened the bonds of patience, mindfulness, and tender attentiveness that defined their courtship. Through these deliberate acts and shared experiences, Eleanor and Charles cultivated a love that was measured, thoughtful, and enduring. Victorian courtship, they discovered, was an art of subtle observation, gentle gestures, and steady patience. Each encounter, no matter how small, contributed to a rhythm of affection, building a connection that was quiet, profound, and remarkably resilient. As the day gave way to the soft glow of evening, Eleanor and Charles would walk side by side through the awakening garden, savoring the serenity of nature, the gentle warmth. As spring began to flourish fully, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were alive with color and fragrance, creating a serene backdrop for her continued courtship with Charles. Soft breezes carried the subtle scent of roses and lilacs, and sunlight filtered gently through the branches, casting dappled patterns on the winding garden paths. Every walk through this vibrant landscape became a shared meditation, where each glance, gesture, and word contributed to the quiet symphony of their connection. Their steps were slow and unhurried, gloved hands occasionally brushing against one another. Each gentle touch, each fleeting smile, and each carefully chosen word conveyed deep care and attentiveness. The chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the soft murmur of the garden fountain blended together, creating a soothing atmosphere that mirrored the calm and deliberate pace of their Victorian courtship. Within the manor, the drawing room provided a sanctuary of warmth and tranquility. Eleanor played delicate melodies on the piano, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys, while Charles listened with quiet admiration. Occasionally, he would offer a soft hum or a gentle word of praise, creating a shared rhythm that deepened the intimacy of their time together. The flickering fire in the hearth and the gentle glow of candlelight made the room feel like a cocoon of calm, a private space where their hearts could communicate in subtle, meaningful ways. Thoughtful gestures remained an essential part of their bond. Charles might leave a freshly pressed spring flower in Eleanor's book of poetry, while she responded with a delicately written note expressing her gratitude. Each modest offering held significance, reflecting their careful attention, patience, and the quiet nurturing of affection. Even ordinary moments carried weight. A shared glance across the room, a fleeting smile during a conversation, or the soft exchange of a compliment became expressions of care and mutual understanding. Victorian dating, Eleanor and Charles understood, was not about grand declarations, but about observing, appreciating, and attending to one another with gentle patience. Through these steady, deliberate interactions, their love blossomed slowly, yet surely. Each day, each moment, each subtle gesture reinforced their bond, cultivating a connection rooted in respect, mindfulness, and enduring tenderness. As evenings settled over the manor and the garden shimmered in the soft twilight, Eleanor and Charles walked side by side, savoring. As spring matured into early summer, the garden paths surrounding Eleanor's manor were ablaze with blossoms in every hue. Roses, peonies, and lilacs swayed gently in the warm breeze, their scents mingling in the air to create a serene, almost hypnotic atmosphere. Eleanor and Charles walked slowly along these paths, their gloved hands occasionally brushing, each contact carrying the quiet significance of their deliberate Victorian courtship. Their conversation was soft and measured, each word chosen with care, often interspersed with gentle laughter or thoughtful reflection. Charles might comment on the delicate beauty of a rose in bloom, or Eleanor might share a memory of a past garden walk. Each exchange, while simple, was laden with attentive observation and subtle affection. The surrounding nature, the rustle of leaves, the soft hum of bees, and the distant babble of the fountain enhanced the peaceful rhythm of their walks. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of calm. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing soft melodies that filled the room with warmth and serenity. Charles listened quietly, occasionally offering a murmured compliment or gentle hum, his presence steady and reassuring. The crackle of the fireplace and the flicker of candlelight added layers of intimacy, creating a cocoon in which they could share these quiet moments without interruption. Gifts and gestures continued to carry deep meaning. Charles might leave a freshly pressed flower within the pages of a poetry book, while Eleanor responded with a delicately written note or small token. Each gesture, while modest, reflected the attentiveness and thoughtfulness that defined their courtship, nurturing a connection built on patience and quiet devotion. Even fleeting moments held significance. A glance across the room, a brief shared smile, or a small act of kindness, such as offering a chair or adjusting a shawl, were subtle expressions of care. In Victorian courtship, Eleanor and Charles learned it was these small, deliberate actions that communicated respect, affection, and commitment far more profoundly than hurried declarations ever could. Through these gentle interactions, their love flourished steadily and naturally. Each day, each shared experience, and each thoughtful gesture reinforced their bond. As the early summer sun began to set, casting a soft golden glow across the garden, Eleanor and Charles walked side by side, hand in glove. As the days grew longer and the summer sun bathed the gardens in warmth, Eleanor and Charles continued their courtship with a serene, deliberate rhythm. The garden was alive with color. Roses blushed in deep pinks. Lilacs released their delicate scent, and peonies swayed gently in the breeze. Every step along the soft paths was measured, gloved hands brushing together at intervals, each touch quiet but filled with gentle significance. Their conversation, soft and unhurried, often lingered on observations of nature. Charles might remark on the intricate pattern of petals on a newly opened rose, or Eleanor might comment on the gentle flutter of a butterfly passing overhead. Each word, though simple, carried a depth of attention and subtle affection. The ambient sounds of summer, the distant hum of bees, the whisper of leaves, and the gentle trickle of the garden fountain provided a calming, almost meditative soundtrack to their companionship. Inside the manor, the drawing room offered a sanctuary of warmth and intimacy. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully across the piano keys, filling the space with gentle melodies. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or murmured praise. The fire crackled in the hearth, and the flicker of candlelight cast dancing shadows across the walls, enhancing the serene atmosphere of shared presence. Small, thoughtful gestures continued to mark their bond. A carefully pressed flower, a handwritten note tucked inside a favorite book, or a modest ribbon tied with care symbolized their attentiveness and growing affection. Each gesture, however understated, reinforced the deep respect and consideration that defined Victorian courtship. Even ordinary moments, such as passing one another in a sunlit hallway, sharing a fleeting smile, or offering a gentle word of encouragement, were imbued with significance. Through these deliberate, measured interactions, Eleanor and Charles cultivated a love built on observation, patience, and subtle attentiveness. Through the steady rhythm of daily life, the calm of the garden, and the warmth of the manor, their affection grew slowly but profoundly. Victorian courtship, they had come to understand, was a delicate dance of gestures, glances, and quiet attentiveness. As evening fell and the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the garden, as summer settled into its full warmth, Eleanor and Charles continued to nurture their courtship with the same gentle attention and deliberate care that had defined it from the beginning. The garden flourished around them, roses, lilacs, and peonies in full bloom, each petal kissed by sunlight and soft summer breezes. Walking along the winding paths, gloved hands occasionally brushed, and each small touch spoke volumes, a quiet testament to their growing affection. The soft murmurs of conversation flowed naturally, filled with shared observations and reflections. Charles might comment on the delicate symmetry of a flower's petals, while Eleanor might marvel at the dance of sunlight on the leaves. Each word, spoken softly and deliberately, became an instrument of connection, carrying with it a sense of attentiveness and care. Around them, the garden provided a serene soundtrack. Birdsong, the rustle of leaves, and the faint gurgle of the fountain combined into a calming symphony. Inside the manor, the drawing room offered warmth and quiet intimacy. Eleanor played soft, flowing melodies on the piano, each note hovering in the room like a gentle sigh. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered compliment, his presence steady and comforting. The flickering fire cast dancing shadows across the walls, and the soft candlelight reflected the warmth of their shared companionship. Tokens of affection continued to punctuate their courtship. A pressed flower carefully placed in a book, a subtly embroidered handkerchief, or a short, handwritten note were simple but meaningful gestures. Each small offering expressed thoughtfulness, respect, and attention, reinforcing the deliberate, patient nurturing of their bond. Even fleeting moments, exchanging a glance across the room, a soft smile during tea, or a gentle touch on a shoulder, were imbued with quiet significance. Victorian courtship taught them that true intimacy was cultivated not through grand gestures, but through patience, observation, and the subtle, consistent care shown in everyday life. Through this measured, deliberate rhythm, Eleanor and Charles' love grew deeper and steadier. Each shared experience, each gentle gesture, and each attentive word built a foundation of trust. As the summer slowly transitioned toward early autumn, the garden surrounding Eleanor's manor shifted in color and atmosphere. Soft sunlight warmed the vibrant blooms, and a gentle breeze carried the subtle scent of ripening flowers. Eleanor and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the winding paths, gloved hands brushing occasionally, each touch a quiet expression of attentiveness and care. Their conversations were soft, reflective, and full of meaning. Charles might point out the intricate veins of a leaf, or Eleanor might comment on the fluttering of a butterfly across the garden. Each word, though simple, conveyed careful thought and subtle affection. The gentle rustle of leaves and the distant gurgle of the fountain provided a serene backdrop, creating a sense of calm that mirrored the deliberate rhythm of their courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and quiet intimacy. Eleanor played gentle melodies on the piano, each note floating softly through the air. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered compliment, his presence a steady comfort. The flickering fire and the glow of candles enhanced the tranquil atmosphere, making their shared moments feel suspended in time. Small, thoughtful gestures continued to define their connection. A pressed flower left in a poetry book, a delicately written note, or a modest token of affection served as expressions of care and mindfulness. Each act, however understated, reinforced the trust, respect, and quiet tenderness that had grown between them. Even ordinary interactions carried significance. A shared glance across the room, a fleeting smile during tea, or a gentle adjustment of a shawl became meaningful expressions of connection. Victorian courtship emphasized these subtleties, teaching Eleanor and Charles that love flourished most profoundly when nurtured with patience, attentiveness, and thoughtful consideration. Through these deliberate and measured actions, their bond deepened steadily. Each shared experience, each thoughtful gesture, and each quiet moment contributed to a foundation of enduring love and understanding. As the sun dipped low, casting warm golden light across the garden, Eleanor and Charles walked side by side along the winding paths, savoring the calm serenity of the evening, the gentle presence of one another, and As autumn deepened, the garden surrounding Eleanor's manor became a tapestry of warm, rich colors, gold, amber, and deep crimson, blending harmoniously under the soft, diffused light of the season. Eleanor and Charles continued their walks with deliberate care, moving slowly along the winding paths, their gloved hands brushing occasionally. Each touch, each glance, conveyed gentle attentiveness and quiet affection. The hallmarks of a Victorian courtship refined through patience and thoughtfulness. Their conversations were soft and reflective, full of observations about the beauty surrounding them. Charles might point out the intricate pattern of a leaf, or the subtle shimmer of dew on a flower, while Eleanor might comment on the gentle rustle of branches in the wind. Each shared observation created a silent dialogue, strengthening the bond between them and heightening the awareness of one another's presence. The rustling leaves and distant sounds of the manor blended seamlessly into this tranquil rhythm, fostering a serene atmosphere for connection. Inside the manor, the drawing room offered warmth and sanctuary. Eleanor would play soft, flowing melodies on the piano, each note floating lightly through the air, while Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a gentle hum or a whispered word of praise. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, and the flickering candlelight illuminated the room, creating a cocoon of calm where presence and attention were shared effortlessly. Gifts and small gestures continued to punctuate their courtship. A carefully pressed autumn leaf placed in a favorite book, a delicate ribbon tied with care, or a modest note expressing thoughtful sentiments were simple yet meaningful expressions of respect, affection, and attentiveness. Each gesture strengthened the trust and tenderness that had developed over months of careful nurturing. Even the simplest moments held significance. A fleeting smile exchanged across the room, the quiet offering of a chair, or the gentle adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet profound expressions of care. Eleanor and Charles learned that love, in the Victorian tradition, thrived in small, deliberate actions rather than grand declarations. Through these patient, measured interactions, their bond deepened naturally and steadily. Each shared experience, each thoughtful gesture, and each quiet moment built a foundation. As late autumn gave way to the first hints of winter, Eleanor and Charles' courtship remained a gentle, deliberate dance of attention and care. The garden, now dusted with the first frost, reflected the soft light of the low sun, casting long shadows across the winding paths. Every step they took was measured and thoughtful, gloved hands occasionally brushing, a quiet reminder of the growing tenderness between them. Their conversations were calm and reflective, often focusing on the changing seasons. Charles might remark on the delicate shimmer of frost on the leaves, while Eleanor might comment on the way sunlight painted the bare branches in gold. Each exchange, however simple, carried deep significance, a testament to the patience and attentiveness that had defined their relationship. The soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of a winter bird, and the quiet murmur of the garden fountain provided a soothing backdrop for these serene moments. Within the manor, the drawing room offered a cozy refuge. Eleanor played gentle melodies on the piano, her fingers moving with grace, while Charles listened attentively, offering the occasional soft hum or murmured word of appreciation. The crackling fire and flickering candlelight bathed the room in warmth, creating an atmosphere of calm intimacy, where even silence became a form of connection. Thoughtful gestures continued to express the depth of their bond. Charles might place a carefully pressed leaf inside a book of poetry, while Eleanor responded with a delicately written note or a small, meaningful token. Each act, however modest, reflected care, respect, and the patient cultivation of affection, reinforcing the slow, deliberate rhythm of their courtship. Even ordinary moments carried profound meaning. A shared glance across the room, a fleeting smile during tea, or a gentle touch on a hand all became subtle yet powerful expressions of connection. Victorian courtship, Eleanor and Charles realized, thrived in these small, intentional gestures. In the measured cultivation of presence, observation, and care. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love grew stronger, rooted in respect, attentiveness, and quiet devotion. As the winter sun dipped low, casting a soft glow over the frost-covered garden, Eleanor and Charles walked side by side along the familiar paths, savoring the calm beauty of their surroundings and the tender, enduring love that had blossomed steadily between their hearts. As winter fully settled over the manor, Eleanor and Charles' courtship moved forward with the same serene, deliberate rhythm that had characterized every season before. Snow dusted the garden paths and blanketed the trees, softening the world in a quiet, almost magical hush. Each step they took on the crisp, white ground was careful and measured, gloved hands brushing occasionally, their small gestures carrying deep significance and quiet affection. Their conversation flowed softly, deliberate and thoughtful. Charles might observe the way sunlight sparkled across a snowflake, while Eleanor might remark on the delicate frost patterns on a window pane. Every shared observation was a small act of connection, reinforcing the attentiveness and care that formed the foundation of their Victorian courtship. Round them, the muted sounds of winter, the whisper of wind through bare branches, the distant call of a bird, the soft crunch of snow underfoot, provided a serene backdrop, inviting calmness and gentle reflection. Inside the manor, the drawing room became a warm sanctuary from the chill outside. Eleanor played quiet, flowing melodies on the piano, her music weaving a gentle atmosphere of peace. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or a whisper of admiration. The fire crackled in the hearth, and the flicker of candlelight cast comforting shadows across the room, creating an intimate cocoon where they could simply exist in each other's presence. Gifts and gestures continued to hold meaning. Charles might leave a small sprig of holly or a pressed flower in a book, while Eleanor responded with a short handwritten note or a modest token of her own. Each act, though understated, was an expression of thoughtfulness, respect, and growing affection, strengthening their bond through patient, deliberate attention. Even ordinary moments were imbued with significance. A shared glance, a quiet smile, or a gentle adjustment of a shawl became subtle expressions of connection, showing that true intimacy often lies in the simplest, most thoughtful gestures. Through these careful, mindful interactions, Eleanor and Charles nurtured a love that was slow, steady, and profoundly enduring. Victorian courtship revealed itself as an art of patience, attentiveness, and deliberate affection. As the winter sun dipped low over the snowy, as the heart of winter stretched onward, the world outside Eleanor's manor was quiet and hushed, wrapped in a soft blanket of snow. The gardens, though dormant, held a quiet beauty, with frost glistening on bare branches and icicles hanging delicately from the eaves. Eleanor and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the snow-dusted paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing, each small contact infused with attentiveness and tender care. Their conversations remained soft and thoughtful. Charles might comment on the sparkle of sunlight on ice, while Eleanor might observe the delicate tracks of birds in the snow. Each exchange, however simple, deepened their understanding and appreciation of one another. Around them, The subtle sounds of winter, the whisper of wind through the trees, the faint crunch of their footsteps on frosted ground, and the occasional distant call of a bird provided a calming, serene backdrop to their deliberate, measured courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room offered warmth and comfort. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that filled the space with tranquility. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a gentle hum or whispered word of admiration. The crackling fire and the soft glow of candlelight created an intimate cocoon where every glance, gesture, and word could be shared and appreciated. Thoughtful gestures remained central to their courtship. Small sprig of Harley carefully placed in a book, a handwritten note, or a modest ribbon tied with care conveyed thoughtfulness, respect, and attention. Each gesture, however understated, reinforced the bond they were cultivating, highlighting the gentle, deliberate rhythm of Victorian dating. Even the most ordinary moments became expressions of connection. A shared glance, quiet smile, or a subtle adjustment of clothing or a shawl conveyed care and affection. Eleanor and Charles learned that love flourished not through haste or extravagance, but through patient observation, deliberate action, and consistent, thoughtful attention. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love grew quietly but profoundly. Each day, each gesture, and each shared moment added layers to a foundation of trust, understanding. As winter slowly began to loosen its grip, hints of early thaw appeared in the garden. Snow melted in delicate rivulets, revealing patches of frost-kissed earth and the first brave shoots of new life. Eleanor and Charles continued their walks along the winding paths, their steps careful and unhurried, gloved hands occasionally brushing together, each touch a quiet affirmation of their growing connection. Their conversations were soft and deliberate, often focused on the subtle changes in the garden. Charles might point out the shimmer of ice melting into droplets, while Eleanor observed the early green of tender shoots pushing through the soil. Every remark was thoughtful, each shared observation a gentle thread weaving their bond more tightly. Around them, the garden whispered softly, the trickle of thawing water, the rustle of remaining leaves, and the faint call of returning birds created a serene, meditative atmosphere that mirrored the deliberate rhythm of their courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a haven of warmth and calm. Eleanor played gentle, flowing melodies on the piano, her hands moving gracefully across the keys. Charles listened with quiet admiration, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, while candlelight flickered across the walls, enveloping the room in an intimate, soothing glow. Their shared presence, even in silence, became a conversation of its own, expressing care, attentiveness, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark their connection. Charles might leave a small sprig of early greenery in a favorite book, while Eleanor might respond with a delicately written note or a modest token of her own. These simple acts communicated thoughtfulness, respect, and the patient cultivation of love, reinforcing the enduring rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Even everyday moments carried meaning. A glance across the room, a subtle smile, or a gentle adjustment of a scarf or shawl became understated expressions of care and connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that true intimacy was built in the quiet, deliberate, and attentive gestures of everyday life. Through these patient, mindful interactions, their love grew steadily and gracefully. Each shared experience, each gentle touch, and each thoughtful word added depth to the foundation of trust, respect, and affection they had nurtured together. The young woman sits quietly, her body fully relaxed in the softness of her chair, the warmth of the fire wrapping around her like a gentle, comforting blanket. Candlelight flickers softly, casting slow, fluid shadows across the walls and furniture. Each flicker and movement mirrors the rhythm of her steady, calm breathing, inviting your own body and mind to follow, sinking deeper into comfort and serenity. Outside, the garden rests beneath the moon's silvery glow. Leaves sway lightly in the night breeze, producing a soft, soothing rustle. The faint call of a nightbird and the subtle fragrance of night-blooming flowers drift on the air. Imagine yourself walking quietly through this tranquil garden, feeling the cool, gentle air on your skin, sensing the serene rhythm of nature, and allowing it to ease your mind and body into deep relaxation. Inside, she lifts a small embroidered cushion and smooths it gently, enjoying the deliberate, mindful motion. The fire crackles softly, the grandfather clock ticks in measured beats, and the room hums with harmonious, subtle sounds, the whisper of fabric, the gentle movement of furniture, the faint murmur of voices in the distance. Each sound adds to a soothing symphony, guiding your mind and body further into peace and calm. The young woman reaches for a delicate porcelain teacup, inhaling its calming aroma before taking a slow, deliberate sip. The warmth spreads through her hands and chest, deepening her sense of comfort and tranquility. Let your own breath follow this rhythm, inhaling serenity. Exhaling, tension allowing every detail of the room and evening to deepen your relaxation. She leans back fully into her chair, closing her eyes and letting the soft glow of candlelight and the warmth of the fire wash over her completely. Picture yourself there, surrounded by gentle light, cozy warmth, and the soothing rhythm of the Victorian home. Feel your muscles relax completely, your thoughts soften, and your body drift effortlessly like leaves floating on a calm stream. In this quiet, ordered world, every small movement, every deliberate gesture, and every gentle sound creates a sanctuary of calm. The warmth, the flickering glow, and the measured rhythm of life guide you naturally into the deepest, most restorative sleep. Allow yourself to drift fully into the serene embrace of night, feeling safe, comforted, and entirely at ease. As spring unfolded fully, the garden surrounding Eleanor's manor became a canvas of soft pastels, with delicate blooms swaying gently in the mild breeze. Eleanor and Charles continued their walks along the winding paths, moving slowly and deliberately. Gloved hands brushed occasionally, each small touch a silent message of affection, patience, and attentiveness. Their conversations remained soft and reflective, often revolving around the beauty and transformation of the garden. Charles might notice the intricate pattern of petals on a newly opened flower, while Eleanor observed the playful dance of sunlight on leaves. Every remark, though simple, deepened their understanding and appreciation of one another. The natural sounds of spring, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant hum of bees, and the gentle trickle of water from the fountain provided a tranquil backdrop that mirrored the calm, measured pace of their Victorian courtship. Within the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and gentle intimacy. Eleanor played flowing, soft melodies on the piano, each note creating a gentle rhythm in the room. Charles listened attentively, offering the occasional soft hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth, while candlelight flickered across the walls, enveloping the room in a soothing, almost hypnotic glow. Their shared presence, even in silence, spoke volumes, expressing care, attentiveness, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark their growing bond. Charles might leave a pressed flower within the pages of a book, while Eleanor responded with a delicately written note or a modest token of her own. Each act, however understated, reflected thoughtfulness, patience, and deliberate cultivation of love. These subtle expressions became the quiet language of their courtship, reinforcing trust, tenderness, and mutual respect. Even fleeting moments held profound significance. A glance exchanged across the room, a shared smile, or a gentle touch on a hand became understated but meaningful expressions of their connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that the deepest intimacy often grew through these small, deliberate gestures rather than grand declarations. As spring deepened, the gardens of Eleanor's manor became a sanctuary of color and gentle fragrance. The soft sunlight illuminated blooms of pink, lilac, and white, casting a serene glow over the winding paths. Eleanor and Charles continued their deliberate, unhurried walks, gloved hands occasionally brushing, each touch a subtle and tender reminder of the growing intimacy between them. Their conversations flowed softly, carefully, often reflecting on the gentle beauty around them. Charles might comment on the delicate symmetry of a blooming rose, while Eleanor might observe the soft ripple of sunlight on the fountain's water. Each observation, each shared thought deepened their connection. The natural sounds of the garden, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of birds, and the faint trickle of water formed a gentle soundtrack to their measured courtship, encouraging calm reflection and attentive presence. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a warm haven. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing gentle, flowing melodies that resonated softly throughout the space. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, and candlelight flickered gently across the room, casting a soothing glow that seemed to slow time itself, creating a cocoon of intimacy and comfort. Thoughtful gestures continued to be central to their growing bond. Charles might place a freshly picked flower in a book of poetry, while Eleanor responded with a short handwritten note or a modest token of appreciation. Each small act, understated yet meaningful, reinforced their respect, attentiveness, and the deliberate nurturing of their affection. These gestures became a quiet language of love, one spoken through careful observation and patient attention rather than hurried declarations. Even ordinary moments held significance. A fleeting glance, a soft smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl was imbued with meaning, demonstrating care, consideration, and mutual understanding. Eleanor and Charles understood that Victorian courtship was built upon these subtle, deliberate acts, which nurtured trust and intimacy steadily over time. Through these mindful, gentle interactions, their love continued to blossom with patience and grace. Each shared as late spring blossomed fully. The gardens around Eleanor's manor were alive with vibrant colors and the gentle hum of nature. Blossoms swayed softly in the warm breeze, and sunlight streamed through the trees, painting dappled patterns on the winding paths. Eleanor and Charles continued their measured, deliberate walks, gloved hands occasionally brushing, each subtle touch a tender reflection of attentiveness and growing intimacy. Their conversations were soft, reflective, and thoughtful. Charles might notice the way sunlight caught the curve of a petal, while Eleanor might marvel at the gentle dance of leaves in the breeze. Every word and shared observation deepened their understanding and connection. The soft sounds of the garden, the murmur of the fountain, distant bird calls, the gentle rustle of leaves, provided a serene backdrop, reinforcing the calm, deliberate rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Within the manor, the drawing room offered a sanctuary of warmth and intimacy. Eleanor's hands glided gracefully over the piano keys, filling the room with flowing, gentle melodies. Charles listened quietly, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered compliment. The fire crackled steadily in the hearth. Candlelight flickered gently across the walls, creating a soothing ambience in which silence itself became a form of communication. Thoughtful gestures continued to punctuate their connection. Charles might leave a pressed flower in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicately written note or a modest token of appreciation. Each small act, though understated, communicated respect, care, and deliberate nurturing of their affection. Over time, these gestures became the subtle language of their courtship, expressing love without the need for words. Even ordinary moments carried significance. Shared glance across the room, a fleeting smile, or the quiet adjustment of a shawl or hand demonstrated attentiveness, thoughtfulness, and understanding. Eleanor and Charles had learned that true intimacy was built not on grand gestures, but on patient observation, gentle attention, and deliberate care. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love grew slowly but deeply. Each shared moment, each thoughtful word, and each gentle gesture strengthened the foundation of trust, respect, and enduring affection. As the sun began to lower, casting golden light over the vibrant garden, as summer approached, the gardens around Eleanor's manor were bathed in warm sunlight, alive with the gentle sway of blossoms and the soft hum of bees. Eleanor and Charles continued their careful, deliberate walks, gloved hands, occasionally brushing, each touch a quiet testament to their attentiveness and growing affection. The world around them seemed to move in a slower, more deliberate rhythm, echoing the patient pace of their courtship. Their conversations were soft, reflective, and full of thoughtfulness. Charles might observe the shimmer of sunlight on a newly opened rose, while Eleanor marveled at the gentle flutter of butterflies in the garden. Each remark, though simple, strengthened their connection, allowing their shared presence to convey care and understanding. The subtle sounds of summer, the rustle of leaves, the trickle of water from the fountain, and the distant songs of birds formed a serene backdrop, complementing the calm, attentive rhythm of their interactions. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a warm, intimate sanctuary. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing gentle, flowing melodies that filled the space with calm and serenity. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled softly, while candlelight flickered across the walls, creating an atmosphere of quiet intimacy, where shared presence spoke louder than words. Thoughtful gestures continued to play an essential role in their bond. Charles might leave a carefully pressed flower within the pages of a book, while Eleanor responded with a small handwritten note or modest token. Each simple act, though understated, communicated consideration, attentiveness, and the steady nurturing of affection, reinforcing the deliberate, patient rhythm of Victorian courtship. Even ordinary moments carried profound significance. A fleeting glance, a shared smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became meaningful expressions of care. Eleanor and Charles understood that love thrived in these small, deliberate actions rather than in grand declarations. Each gesture quietly building trust, understanding, and intimacy. Through these patient, mindful interactions, their love continued to blossom. As summer deepened, the gardens of Eleanor's manor became a vivid tapestry of color and fragrance. Soft sunlight filtered through the trees, casting gentle shadows along the winding paths. Eleanor and Charles continued their deliberate, unhurried walks, gloved hands occasionally brushing, each touch a quiet expression of care and growing affection. Their conversations were gentle and thoughtful. Charles might point out the delicate curve of a petal, while Eleanor observed the shimmer of sunlight on the fountain's water. Each shared remark deepened their connection, allowing observation and attentiveness to communicate what words alone could not. Around them, the sounds of summer, the soft hum of bees, the rustle of leaves, and the distant song of birds formed a serene, almost hypnotic backdrop to their measured Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Eleanor played soft, flowing melodies on the piano, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled gently, while the flicker of candlelight cast dancing shadows across the room, enveloping them in a cocoon of intimacy and quiet presence. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark their growing bond. Charles might leave a pressed flower in Eleanor's poetry book, while she responded with a delicately written note or a modest token of her own. These small, understated acts communicated attentiveness, respect, and the steady nurturing of love, creating a language of subtle gestures that strengthened their connection. Even the simplest moments were filled with meaning. Fleeting glance, a shared smile, or the quiet adjustment of a shawl became understated, yet significant expressions of care. Eleanor and Charles understood that true intimacy often grew not from grand declarations, but from consistent, thoughtful attention and patient observation. Through these measured, mindful interactions, their love flourished steadily and gracefully. Each shared experience, each thoughtful gesture, and each quiet moment reinforced the foundation of trust, respect, and enduring affection. As the golden light of late summer bathed the garden, Eleanor and Charles walked side by side along the familiar paths, savoring the serene beauty of the As late summer edged toward early autumn, the gardens around Eleanor's manor shifted in color, soft golds and amber leaves mingling with lingering blooms. Eleanor and Charles continued their measured, unhurried walks, gloved hands, occasionally brushing. Each subtle touch carried with it care, attentiveness, and a quiet expression of the deepening affection that had grown steadily between them over the seasons. Their conversations remained gentle, thoughtful, and deliberate. Charles might remark on the shimmer of sunlight on a late-blooming rose, while Eleanor observed the graceful flutter of leaves in the soft breeze. Every shared observation, though simple, was a tender act of connection, a way to communicate attentiveness without haste. Around them, the garden whispered softly, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of the fountain, and the gentle hum of insects created a soothing, almost hypnotic backdrop for their slow, deliberate courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing gentle, flowing melodies that filled the room with tranquility. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, while the soft glow of candlelight flickered across the walls, creating an intimate atmosphere in which every glance, gesture, and word could be fully appreciated. Small, thoughtful gestures continued to define their bond. While she responded with a handwritten note or modest token, each understated act expressed care, patience, and consideration, reinforcing the deliberate rhythm of their Victorian courtship and the quiet nurturing of love. Even ordinary moments held significance. Shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl were small but meaningful acts of attentiveness. Eleanor and Charles understood that love in their world thrived in these subtle, deliberate gestures, each action building the foundation of trust, respect, and intimacy. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love continued to deepen gracefully. Each shared moment, each thoughtful word, and each gentle touch strengthened the foundation of enduring affection. As the soft light of early autumn bathed the garden in warmth, Eleanor and Charles walked. As early autumn fully settled, the garden surrounding Eleanor's manor became a mosaic of amber, gold, and lingering green. Eleanor and Charles continued their deliberate, unhurried walks, gloved hands occasionally brushing, each touch a tender expression of care and deepening affection. The air was crisp and fragrant, carrying the subtle scent of fallen leaves and distant blooms. Their conversations remained soft and reflective, often focusing on the quiet changes in the garden. Charles might point out the delicate pattern of a leaf, while Eleanor noticed the way sunlight filtered through the branches. Each shared observation, however simple, was a gentle act of connection, reinforcing attentiveness, patience, and mutual appreciation. Around them, the garden's subtle sounds, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant gurgle of the fountain, and the occasional bird call created a calming, almost hypnotic rhythm that mirrored the steady pace of their Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a warm sanctuary. Eleanor's hands glided gracefully over the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that filled the room with a serene atmosphere. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, while candlelight flickered softly across the walls, enveloping the space in an intimate, soothing glow where presence alone communicated care and attention. Thoughtful gestures continued to define their bond. Charles might leave a carefully pressed autumn leaf or a small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicately written note or modest gift. Each act, though understated, expressed consideration, attentiveness, and the patient cultivation of their affection, reinforcing the deliberate, mindful rhythm of their courtship. Even the simplest moments carried meaning. A fleeting glance, a shared smile, or the gentle offering of a seat or adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet profound expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that true intimacy was nurtured through patience, observation, and small acts of care rather than grand declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love flourished slowly but deeply. Each shared moment, each gentle gesture, and each thoughtful word strengthened the foundation of trust, understanding, and enduring affection. As autumn progressed, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were awash in rich shades of amber, cur, and deep crimson. The air was crisp, carrying the gentle scent of fallen leaves and the faint perfume of lingering blooms. Eleanor and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the winding paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each touch a quiet testament to the care and attentiveness that had defined their relationship for months. Their conversations remained soft, reflective, and thoughtful. Charles might notice the intricate veins of a leaf or the shimmer of sunlight on a late-blooming flower, while Eleanor observed the gentle sway of branches in the breeze. Every shared remark, every quiet observation, became a subtle expression of their affection, a way of connecting without the need for hurried words. Around them, the garden whispered softly. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, and the murmur of the fountain created a soothing, meditative atmosphere that mirrored the calm, measured rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room offered warmth and comfort. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that filled the room with serenity. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a gentle hum or whispered word of admiration. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, and the flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows, creating an intimate, almost hypnotic cocoon of quiet presence and shared attention. Thoughtful gestures continued to define the bond between them. Charles might place a carefully pressed leaf in a favorite book, while Eleanor responded with a small, handwritten note or modest token of appreciation. These understated acts communicated thoughtfulness, respect, and deliberate nurturing of their affection, reinforcing the gentle, patient rhythm of their courtship. Even ordinary moments held profound significance. A fleeting glance, a quiet smile, or a gentle adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet meaningful expressions of care. Eleanor and Charles understood that love thrived in these small, deliberate gestures rather than in grand declarations, and that each patient, attentive interaction built a foundation of trust, understanding, and intimacy. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love grew. As the days of autumn waned, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were painted in deep shades of russet, gold, and bronze. The crisp air carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the faint aroma of late-blooming flowers. Eleanor and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the familiar paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each touch, though subtle, conveyed attention, care, and the quiet intimacy that had grown steadily between them. Their conversations remained soft, thoughtful, and reflective. Charles might notice the gentle shimmer of frost forming on the tips of leaves in the early morning, while Eleanor observed the intricate weave of sunlight and shadow across the garden paths. Each exchange, though unhurried and simple, served as a tender act of connection, a way to communicate patience, attentiveness, and affection without the need for hurried words. Around them, the garden whispered quietly. The rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant hum of the fountain, and the occasional call of a bird created a soothing backdrop, encouraging calm reflection and shared presence. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that seemed to linger in the air. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered compliment. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and candlelight flickered across the room, casting a soft glow that created an intimate, cocoon-like atmosphere where presence alone conveyed care, understanding, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark the rhythm of their courtship. Charles might leave a carefully pressed leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate handwritten note or modest gift. Each understated act expressed consideration, patience, and the deliberate nurturing of affection, reinforcing the slow, attentive pace of their Victorian dating. Even ordinary moments carried quiet significance. A shared glance, a soft smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became understated yet meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that love thrived in these small, deliberate gestures, and that patience, observation, and thoughtful attention were the foundation of lasting intimacy. As autumn gave way to the final weeks before winter, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were a quiet mosaic of amber, ochre, and lingering green. Fallen leaves carpeted the winding paths, their soft crunch underfoot a gentle accompaniment to Eleanor and Charles' slow, deliberate walks. Gloved hands occasionally brushed, each touch a subtle, tender expression of care, attentiveness, and the enduring intimacy that had grown steadily between them. Their conversations remained soft and reflective, often focused on the changing beauty of the garden. Charles might observe the shimmer of dew on late blooms, while Eleanor noticed the intricate patterns formed by intertwining branches. Each exchange, though gentle and unhurried, deepened their bond, fostering a quiet understanding and mutual appreciation. Around them, the subtle sounds of the garden, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of the fountain, and the occasional bird call created a serene, meditative backdrop, echoing the deliberate rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a haven of warmth and intimacy. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing flowing, soft melodies that filled the room with calm. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and candlelight flickered across the walls, casting soft, dancing shadows. In this intimate cocoon, their shared presence spoke volumes, communicating care, attentiveness, and quiet affection without the need for words. Thoughtful gestures continued to define their bond. Charles might leave a carefully pressed leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate note or modest gift. Each act, though understated, reinforced consideration, patience, and the slow, deliberate cultivation of affection, creating a language of love rooted in attentiveness and respect. Even ordinary moments carried quiet significance. A fleeting glance, a soft smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that intimacy grew through patient observation, deliberate care, and small thoughtful gestures, rather than grand declarations. As the final days of autumn approached, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were a tranquil scene of muted golds, deep ambers, and scattered russets. The air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves, blending with the lingering fragrance of the last blossoms. Laner and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the familiar paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each touch, though subtle, conveyed care, attention, and the deepening intimacy that had quietly grown between them over the seasons. Their conversations remained soft, reflective, and gentle. Charles might point out the intricate texture of a frost-dusted leaf, while Eleanor observed the delicate interplay of light and shadow across the garden paths. Every shared observation was a tender act of connection, a silent acknowledgement of attentiveness and thoughtful presence. Around them, the garden murmured softly, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The distant gurgle of the fountain and the occasional song of a bird created a calm, soothing backdrop for their measured courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and serenity. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that lingered in the air. Charles listened attentively, offering occasional quiet hums or whispered words of admiration. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, while candlelight flickered softly across the room, creating an intimate cocoon where silence and presence alone could convey care and affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark their Victorian courtship. Charles might leave a pressed autumn leaf or a small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicately written note or modest gift. These understated acts communicated attentiveness, patience, and respect, reinforcing the steady, deliberate rhythm of their growing bond. Even simple moments carried significance. A shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet meaningful expressions of care and connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that true intimacy was nurtured through patient observation, deliberate actions, and thoughtful attention rather than grand declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love deepened quietly and gracefully. Each shared moment, as autumn slowly gave way to the first whispers of winter, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor became a quiet tapestry of amber, russet, and muted green. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the subtle aroma of late blooms. Eleanor and Charles continued their deliberate, unhurried walks along the familiar paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each touch a quiet testament to care, attentiveness, and the enduring intimacy that had grown steadily between them. Their conversations remained soft, reflective, and gentle. Charles might notice the way sunlight flickered across frost-tipped leaves, while Eleanor observed the intricate patterns of shadows on the garden paths. Each shared observation, however simple, served as a tender act of connection, a quiet acknowledgement of attentiveness, thoughtfulness, and mutual appreciation. Around them, the garden whispered softly, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant murmur of the fountain, and the occasional call of a bird provided a serene backdrop, mirroring the calm, deliberate rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a haven of warmth and tranquility. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that filled the room with serenity. Charles listened attentively, offering occasional gentle hums or whispered words of praise. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, while candlelight flickered across the walls, creating a soothing, intimate atmosphere in which shared presence alone conveyed care, understanding, and affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to define the steady rhythm of their courtship. Charles might leave a carefully pressed leaf or a small token in Eleanor's book, Atia, while she responded with a delicately written note or modest gift. Each understated act communicated attentiveness, patience, and deliberate cultivation of affection, reinforcing the quiet, mindful pace of their relationship. Even ordinary moments held significance: shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became subtle but meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that love was nurtured through patient observation, its deliberate action, and small, thoughtful gestures, rather than grand declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love deepened. As the first hints of winter approached, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor became a quiet sanctuary of amber leaves and the soft scent of late blooms. Eleanor and Charles continued their deliberate, unhurried walks, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each subtle touch was a tender expression of care, attentiveness, and the steady intimacy that had grown between them through the changing seasons. Their conversations remained soft, thoughtful, and reflective. Charles might point out the shimmer of frost forming along the garden path, while Eleanor observed the gentle sway of bare branches in the cool breeze. Each quiet exchange strengthened their bond, a patient and deliberate form of communication that relied on observation, attentiveness, and shared appreciation. Around them, the garden whispered. Leaves rustled softly. The fountain gurgled quietly in the distance, and the occasional bird called, creating a tranquil backdrop that mirrored the calm, measured rhythm of Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a haven of warmth and intimacy. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing flowing, gentle melodies that seemed to linger in the room. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered word of admiration. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth, while candlelight flickered across the walls, creating an intimate cocoon where presence alone could communicate care, understanding, and quiet affection.
Ow.
Thoughtful gestures continued to define the rhythm of their relationship. Charles might leave a pressed autumn leaf or a small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicately written note or modest gift. These understated acts spoke volumes, reinforcing attentiveness, consideration, and the deliberate nurturing of affection. Even the simplest moments carried quiet significance. Shared glance, a soft smile, or a gentle adjustment of a shawl or a chair became meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that intimacy was cultivated through patience, observation, and small, thoughtful gestures rather than grand, hurried declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love deepened quietly and gracefully. Each shared experience, each thoughtful gesture, and each gentle word added layers to the foundation of trust. As winter quietly approached, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were a tranquil mix of amber leaves, frosted earth, and lingering late blooms. Eleanor and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the winding paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each small touch was a gentle expression of care, attentiveness, and the quiet intimacy that had grown steadily between them over the past seasons. Their conversations remained soft, reflective, and thoughtful. Charles might remark on the delicate shimmer of frost on a leaf, while Eleanor observed the subtle play of sunlight and shadow across the garden paths. Every shared observation, however simple, became a tender act of connection, a way to communicate patience, attentiveness, and affection. Around them, the subtle sounds of winter rustling leaves, the faint gurgle of the fountain, and the occasional bird call created a soothing backdrop, echoing the calm, deliberate rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that filled the room with serenity. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered word of admiration. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and candlelight flickered softly across the walls, creating an intimate cocoon where presence alone communicated care, understanding, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark their bond. Charles might leave a pressed leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicately written note or modest gift. Each understated act communicated attentiveness, patience, and deliberate nurturing of affection. Reinforcing the quiet, mindful rhythm of their Victorian courtship, even ordinary moments carried significance. Fleeting glance, a shared smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that love was cultivated through patient observation, deliberate actions, and small, thoughtful gestures rather than grand declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love deepened quietly and profoundly. Each shared moment, each gentle word, and each deliberate gesture strengthened the foundation. As winter settled more fully over the manor, the gardens became a quiet landscape of frosted leaves, bare branches, and soft traces of snow beginning to appear. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of earth and lingering blooms. Eleanor and Charles continued their measured, unhurried walks along the winding paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each touch was a tender expression of care, attentiveness, and the enduring intimacy that had grown steadily between them through the changing seasons. Their conversations remained gentle, reflective, and thoughtful. Charles might point out the delicate shimmer of frost on a branch, while Eleanor observed the intricate play of shadows on the snow-dusted ground. Each small observation became a shared moment of connection, a way to express patience, attentiveness, and affection without needing hurried words. Around them, the garden whispered softly, the rustle of leaves, the faint murmur of the fountain, and the occasional distant call of a bird created a calm, almost hypnotic backdrop for their deliberate Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and intimacy. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that lingered in the room. Charles listened attentively, offering occasional quiet hums or whispered words of praise. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and the flickering candlelight cast soft shadows across the walls, creating a cocoon of calm where presence alone could communicate care, attention, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark the rhythm of their bond. Charles might leave a carefully pressed leaf or a small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate handwritten note or modest gift. These understated acts communicated attentiveness, consideration, and deliberate nurturing of affection, reinforcing the slow, mindful cadence of their Victorian courtship. Even the simplest moments held meaning. A shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet profound expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that love thrived in these small, deliberate gestures, and that patience, observation, and thoughtful attention were the foundation of lasting intimacy. The young woman sits quietly, fully relaxed, her body sinking gently into the soft cushions of her chair. The warmth of the fire spreads softly through the room, while candlelight flickers across the walls and furniture, casting slow, flowing shadows. Each flicker mirrors her calm, steady breathing, inviting your body and mind to sink deeper into comfort and serenity. Outside, the garden rests peacefully beneath the silver glow of the moon. Leaves sway gently in the night breeze, brushing softly against one another. The distant call of a night bird and the faint fragrance of night-blooming flowers fill the air. Imagine yourself walking slowly through this tranquil garden, feeling the cool night air on your skin, the gentle touch of leaves, and letting the natural rhythm of the night guide your thoughts and body into a state of profound calm. Inside, she lifts a small, embroidered cushion, smoothing it lightly with mindful care. The fire crackles softly, the grandfather clock ticks steadily, and the room hums quietly with harmonious, subtle sounds, the whisper of fabric, the gentle shift of furniture, the distant murmur of voices. Each sound becomes part of a soothing symphony, guiding your mind and body further into relaxation. She reaches for a delicate porcelain teacup, inhaling its calming aroma before taking a slow, deliberate sip. The warmth spreads through her hands and chest, deepening her sense of comfort and peace. Let your own breath follow this rhythm, inhaling serenity, exhaling tensional, every soft sound, every flicker of light, and every gentle movement to deepen your relaxation even further. The young woman leans back fully into her chair, closing her eyes, and letting the soft glow of candlelight and warmth of the fire envelop her completely. Picture yourself beside her, wrapped in gentle light and cozy warmth. Feeling your muscles loosen, your thoughts drift, and your mind float effortlessly, like leaves on a calm, quiet stream. In this quiet, orderly Victorian home, every small gesture, every deliberate movement, and every gentle sound contributes to an atmosphere of profound calm. The warmth, the flickering glow, and the gentle rhythm of life guide you naturally toward deep, restorative sleep. Allow yourself to drift fully into the serene embrace of night, feeling safe, comforted, and entirely at peace. As winter deepened, the gardens around Eleanor's manor were cloaked in frost and the soft whisper of falling snow. The crisp air carried the faint scent of earth and lingering autumn leaves. Eleanor and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the familiar paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each small touch spoke quietly of care, attentiveness, and the steady intimacy that had blossomed between them through the passing seasons. Their conversations were soft, reflective, and thoughtful. Charles might point out the delicate patterns of frost on a leaf, while Eleanor observed the subtle shimmer of sunlight on the snowy ground. Each shared observation became a tender act of connection, allowing patience, attentiveness, and affection to flourish without the need for hurried words. Around them, the garden murmured gently. Leaves rustled underfoot. The distant fountain gurgled softly, and the occasional bird called, creating a tranquil backdrop that mirrored the slow, measured rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing flowing, gentle melodies that lingered in the room. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a soft hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth, and candlelight flickered across the walls, casting soft, dancing shadows that enveloped the room in intimacy. Presence alone became a language of care, understanding, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to define their relationship. Charles might leave a pressed winter leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicately written note or modest gift. Each understated act communicated attentiveness, patience, and the deliberate cultivation of love, reinforcing the quiet, mindful rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Even the simplest moments carried significance. A shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that true intimacy was nurtured through patient observation, deliberate action, and small, thoughtful gestures rather than grand declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love deepened quietly and profoundly. Each shared experience, each gentle gesture. As winter settled fully over the manor, the gardens were wrapped in a delicate layer of frost, the bare branches etched against a pale sky. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of earth and the last remnants of autumn leaves. Eleanor and Charles continued their measured, unhurried walks along the familiar paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each touch was a quiet testament to care, attentiveness, and the steady intimacy that had developed over the seasons. Their conversations remained soft, reflective, and thoughtful. Charles might notice the subtle glimmer of frost on a branch, while Eleanor observed the patterns of sunlight playing on the snow-dusted paths. Every shared observation became a gentle act of connection, an unspoken acknowledgement of patience, attentiveness, and affection. Around them, the garden whispered softly. Leaves rustled lightly in the breeze. The distant fountain murmured quietly, and the occasional bird called, creating a tranquil backdrop to their deliberate Victorian-style courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a haven of warmth and serenity. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that lingered in the air. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered word of admiration. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and the flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across the walls, enveloping the room in a cozy, intimate glow. Here, silence and presence alone conveyed care, understanding, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to define the rhythm of their bond. Charles might leave a pressed winter leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate handwritten note or modest gift. Each understated act expressed attentiveness, patience, and the deliberate nurturing of affection, reinforcing the slow, mindful cadence of their courtship. Even the simplest moments carried significance. A fleeting glance, a shared smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that true intimacy was cultivated through patience, observation, and small, deliberate gestures, rather than grand declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love continued to deepen gracefully. Each shared experience, as winter deepened further, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were a serene, frosted landscape. Bare branches etched delicate patterns against the pale sky, and the soft crunch of leaves underfoot accompanied Eleanor and Charles' slow, deliberate walks. Gloved hands occasionally brushed, each touch a quiet expression of care, attentiveness, and the steady intimacy that had grown between them through the passing seasons. Their conversations remained soft, reflective, and gentle. I remark on the delicate shimmer of frost on a branch, while Eleanor observed the subtle patterns of sunlight on the snow-covered paths. Each small exchange, however simple, became a tender act of connection, just a patient and deliberate expression of affection. Around them, the garden whispered quietly, leaves rustled lightly in the breeze. The distant fountain murmured softly, and the occasional bird called, providing a calming, meditative backdrop that mirrored the measured rhythm of Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and comfort. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that lingered gently in the room. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, and candlelight flickered across the walls, casting gentle, moving shadows that created a cocoon of intimacy, where presence alone communicated care, understanding, and affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark the steady rhythm of their bond. Charles might leave a pressed leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate handwritten note or modest gift. Each understated act communicated attentiveness, patience, and deliberate nurturing of affection, reinforcing the quiet, mindful cadence of their courtship. Even ordinary moments carried significance: a shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became subtle, yet profound expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that love thrived through patience, observation, and small, thoughtful gestures rather than grand, hurried declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love deepened quietly and gracefully. Each shared experience, each gentle gesture, and each thoughtful word strengthened the foundation of trust. As winter settled fully, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were a quiet expanse of frost-covered earth and bare branches. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and lingering autumn leaves. Eleanor and Charles continued their deliberate, unhurried walks along the winding paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each touch, gentle and subtle, spoke of care, attentiveness, and the quiet intimacy that had developed steadily between them over the months. Their conversations remained soft, reflective, and thoughtful. Charles might notice the shimmer of frost on a late bloom, while Eleanor observed the play of sunlight on the snow-dusted paths. Each shared observation became a tender act of connection, a way to communicate patience, attentiveness, and quiet affection without the need for hurried words. Around them, the garden whispered softly. Leaves rustled gently in the cold breeze. The distant fountain murmured quietly, and the occasional bird called, creating a serene, meditative backdrop to their measured Victorian-style courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Eleanor's hands moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that lingered in the room. Charles listened attentively, offering quiet hums or whispered words of admiration. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and candlelight flickered across the walls, casting a soft, intimate glow. In this cocoon of calm, shared presence alone communicated care, understanding, and affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to define their bond. Charles might leave a pressed winter leaf or a small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate handwritten note or modest gift. Each act, understated yet meaningful, reinforced attentiveness, patience, and the deliberate nurturing of affection, marking the quiet rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Even simple moments held significance. A shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that intimacy was cultivated through small, deliberate gestures, careful observation, and patient attention rather. As winter deepened, the gardens surrounding Eleanor's manor were hushed and serene, frosted leaves crunching softly beneath each careful step. The bare branches of trees formed delicate silhouettes against the pale sky, and the crisp air carried the subtle scent of earth and lingering autumn blooms. Eleanor and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the familiar paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each touch, subtle and tender, spoke quietly of care, attentiveness, and the growing intimacy that had been nurtured over many months. Their conversations were soft, reflective, and gentle. Charles might point out the intricate shimmer of frost on a leaf, while Eleanor observed the soft interplay of light and shadow across the snow-dusted garden paths. Each simple observation became a tender act of connection, a patient, deliberate expression of affection. Around them, the garden whispered softly. Leaves rustled in the cold breeze. The distant fountain murmured quietly, and the occasional bird call added a serene, hypnotic rhythm that mirrored the measured cadence of Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and intimacy. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing flowing, soft melodies that lingered in the air. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered word of praise. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and candlelight flickered across the walls, casting soft shadows that created a cocoon of calm where mere presence communicated care, understanding, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to define the rhythm of their relationship. Charles might leave a pressed winter leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicately written note or modest gift. Each understated act expressed attentiveness, patience, and the deliberate nurturing of affection, reinforcing the slow, mindful pace of their Victorian courtship. Even the simplest moments held deep meaning. A shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet profound expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that love flourished through patience, observation, and small, deliberate gestures rather than grand declarations. Through these, as winter wrapped the gardens in a quiet, frosted stillness, Eleanor and Charles continued their slow, deliberate walks along the winding paths of the manor grounds. The bare branches formed intricate patterns against the pale sky, and the crisp air carried the faint scent of earth and lingering autumn leaves. Gloved hands occasionally brushed, each touch a subtle, tender expression of care, attentiveness, and the enduring intimacy that had developed steadily between them. Their conversations were soft, reflective, and gentle. Charles might notice the delicate glimmer of frost on a late bloom, while Eleanor observed the shifting play of light across the snow-covered paths. Each small remark became a tender act of connection, a patient and deliberate expression of affection. Around them, the garden whispered quietly. The soft rustle of leaves, the distant gurgle of the fountain, and the occasional bird call created a tranquil, almost hypnotic backdrop that echoed the calm, measured rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that lingered in the room. Charles listened attentively, offering gentle hums or whispered words of admiration. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, and candlelight flickered across the walls, casting moving shadows that wrapped the room in a cocoon of intimacy. Presence alone became a language of care, understanding, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to define the rhythm of their bond. Charles might leave a pressed winter leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate handwritten note or modest gift. Each act, understated yet meaningful, reinforced attentiveness, patience, and the deliberate nurturing of affection, marking the quiet cadence of their Victorian courtship. Even the simplest moments carried significance. A shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet profound expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that love thrived through patient observation, deliberate action, and small, thoughtful gestures rather than grand, hurried declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, their love deepened quietly and gracefully. As the heart of winter settled fully over the manor, the gardens were hushed and tranquil, coated in frost and the soft sparkle of early snow. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of earth and the lingering aroma of the last autumn blooms. Eleanor and Charles continued their measured, unhurried walks along the winding paths, gloved hands occasionally brushing. Each subtle touch spoke volumes of care, attentiveness, and the quiet intimacy that had been nurtured over many months. Their conversations were soft, reflective, and thoughtful. Charles might notice the intricate patterns of frost on a branch, while Eleanor observed the delicate interplay of light and shadow across the snow-covered garden paths. Each shared observation became a tender act of connection, a patient and deliberate expression of affection. Around them, the garden whispered quietly, the rustle of leaves underfoot. The distant murmur of the fountain and the occasional bird call created a calm, serene backdrop, mirroring the measured rhythm of Victorian courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a haven of warmth and calm. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully over the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that lingered in the room. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a gentle hum or whispered word of admiration. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, and candlelight flickered across the walls, casting delicate shadows that created a cocoon of intimacy. Here, shared presence alone communicated care, understanding, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark the cadence of their bond. Charles might leave a pressed winter leaf or small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate handwritten note or modest gift. Each understated act expressed attentiveness, patience, and the deliberate nurturing of affection, reinforcing the slow, mindful rhythm of their Victorian courtship. Even ordinary moments held quiet significance. A shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became subtle yet meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that true intimacy was cultivated through patience, observation, and small deliberate gestures rather than grand declarations. Through these steady, mindful interactions, as winter deepened, the manor gardens became a serene world of frost and quiet. Each step Eleanor and Charles took along the winding paths was accompanied by the soft crunch of leaves underfoot, now frozen and brittle. The bare branches etched delicate patterns against the pale sky, and the crisp air carried the faint scent of earth and lingering autumn blooms. Their gloved hands occasionally brushed a gentle, tender expression of care, attentiveness, and the enduring intimacy that had grown steadily between them through the passing months. Their conversations remained soft, reflective, and deliberate. Charles might notice the delicate shimmer of frost on a late leaf, while Eleanor observed the subtle dance of sunlight across the snow-covered garden paths. Each small observation became a shared moment of connection, an unspoken communication of patience, attentiveness, and quiet affection. Around them, the garden whispered softly. Leaves rustled lightly in the cold breeze. The distant fountain murmured quietly, and the occasional bird call added a calming rhythm to their measured Victorian-style courtship. Inside the manor, the drawing room remained a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Eleanor's fingers moved gracefully across the piano keys, producing soft, flowing melodies that lingered in the room. Charles listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet hum or whispered word of admiration. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, and candlelight flickered softly across the walls, casting subtle, moving shadows that wrapped the room in intimacy. Presence alone became a language of care, understanding, and quiet affection. Thoughtful gestures continued to mark the rhythm of their relationship. Charles might leave a pressed winter leaf or a small token in Eleanor's book, while she responded with a delicate handwritten note or modest gift. Each understated act communicated attentiveness, patience, and the deliberate nurturing of affection, reinforcing the slow, mindful cadence of their courtship. Even the simplest moments held significance. A shared glance, a fleeting smile, or the gentle offering of a chair or adjustment of a shawl became meaningful expressions of connection. Eleanor and Charles understood that true intimacy was cultivated through patient observation. Deliberate gestures and small, thoughtful acts